Bienvenidos a esta nueva aula virtual con la profesora Sabrina Paganoni, investigadora principal de dos ensayos clínicos en fase 3 muy avanzados, en este caso el ensayo Centaur, el AMX0035 y también la plataforma Healy. Todas las preguntas, todas las inquietudes de nuestra comunidad serán respondidas por la profesora, así que esperemos que este espacio sea de utilidad para todos ustedes.
Great, thank you so much for inviting me. This is the second time I think that I'm here with your group, and it's always such a great pleasure, and I hope that we can make this a tradition and keep meeting, because I do expect that there will be lots of exciting developments over not just over the next few months, but also over the next few years. And so hopefully we can continue to touch base on a regular basis. I'm always happy to provide you with updates. So I'm talking from the Healy Center for ALS and Mass General, which is located in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States. I'm originally from Italy, and so I speak a little bit of Spanish, but not enough for me to do this in Spanish. So I apologize for that, and so I'll speak in English. So today I want to provide a brief overview. It's going to be brief, about 15 minutes or so, and then really want to use most of the time to talk about your questions and answer your questions. But essentially, I want to tell you where I think we are, where we want to be, and how to get there in terms of the development of new treatments for ALS. So I want to start by saying that multidisciplinary care or supportive care is at this time the gold standard for people living with ALS. That means multidisciplinary care means that we provide a number of tools to everyone who is living with ALS that are not only medications. Certainly that's the first step, but we also want to offer research opportunities, as well as all the things that are listed on the slide and many others that are very important to support quality of life and function for people with this disease. I'm not going to go into the details, but I think this is an important point. In terms of medications, because I think that's the main topic for today's meeting, in the United States, there are two approved products for ALS. One is called Riluzole, and the other one is called Edaravone. Now, the availability of these drugs is a little bit variable when you look at country by country or region by region. So I'm providing you with information in terms of the drugs that are available in the US at this time. And again, different regions may have different availability of drugs. But right now we have Riluzole that was approved in the 90s. It prolongs survival, although it does so kind of to a modest extent. And then we have Edaravone that was approved as an intravenous infusion in 2017 in the US that was shown to slow functional deficit a little bit, although there was no clear survival benefit, although new data may add to this body of knowledge. We also use Nuedexta, which is a combination of dextromethorphan and quinidine, which was approved to treat pseudobulbar affect, which means that some people with ALS have this problem that they have a hard time controlling their emotions, like laughing too much or crying too much. And so this drug helps a lot with that. More recent data also shows that the drug can have some impact also on bulbar function, which means in some people, not everyone, but in some people, it can improve their ability to talk and swallow to some extent. So those are the three drugs that I give routinely to my patients. Now, where we want to be is that we want to be in a place where we can slow or even stop ALS. And I think that based on a number of reasons, I'm not going to go into the details of the reasons today, but I think that from a practical perspective, this will likely require a cocktail of products, meaning we need more than one drug. So when I present drugs, I'm not talking about one drug as opposed to another. I'm saying, probably we're going to continue to add to standard of care, meaning that right now we're prescribing 2 or 3 medications, and maybe in the future, the same person may need maybe 3 or 4 or 5 medications. And if you think about it, if you know anyone who has cancer or even HIV, the first drugs that were developed to treat these conditions, chemotherapy drugs or anti-HIV drugs, really require the combination of a number of drugs to treat these different diseases. So I think that that's what we're going to see in the near term for ALS. Now, long term, we should be able, hopefully, to prevent ALS. And there are some notable efforts in this area, because now there are some efforts, they're only at the research stage right now. They're not clinical, ready for the clinic, but in terms of research, there are efforts to provide gene therapy to people who carry the genetic mutations of ALS if they do so. About 10 to 20% of the ALS population carries a genetic mutation, and now there are efforts to try to turn off those genes, either in people who have the disease, with the idea of slowing or stopping down the disease, and then hopefully in the future, even just giving the drugs to genetic carriers that have not developed the disease yet will be a way to prevent it from happening altogether. So that's kind of what the future holds, I think, at least for people who carry genetic mutations. Now, obviously, as we hopefully, as we are successful in slowing down or even stopping the disease, at some point we also want to reverse it. And so again, that's another long-term goal. But I think I'm going to focus for now on slowing down and stopping ALS in terms of the cocktail of drugs that are in development right now. That's what I'm going to talk about today. So essentially, if we are successful with that, we're going to turn ALS into a chronic condition. So we'll need more drugs, more personalized drugs, to be able to turn it into a chronic condition. And I just want to make another analogy. If you think about HIV again, when HIV was first discovered, like sort of in the 80s or 90s, it was a very deadly disease. People who were infected with the HIV virus would die of AIDS, sometimes very quickly. And right now, that's not the same situation, right? People can get infected with HIV, but they can also live very long and productive lives without ever developing AIDS. And that's because there is a cocktail of drugs that was developed and then improved over time to the point that now HIV is a chronic condition. And that's what we want to do with ALS as well. Now, obviously, as ALS becomes, hopefully in the near future, a more chronic and livable condition, clinical care will also be important. So I do want to emphasize the importance of supporting early diagnosis, more supportive care, more assistive technology to maximize function, and also healthcare system changes to support equitable access, meaning that we hope that everyone, no matter where they live or what their resources are, will be able to access optimal clinical care and supportive care. Now, in the US, 2022 is a very special year for ALS. Now, the PDUFA means that the FDA reviews drugs and tells the community if the drug is approved or not by a certain date. So in the US, the FDA, which is the agency that can grant approval to drugs, approved an oral form of edaravone on May 12, 2022. So right now we are transitioning our patients from intravenous edaravone to oral edaravone, because again, the drug was just approved, and obviously giving the drug by mouth as opposed to intravenously is much easier. In terms of the other drug that's awaiting approval, that's AMX0035, and the PDUFA date, which means the date when the FDA will pronounce whether they're going to approve it or not, is September 29th. So I'm sorry that I cannot provide you with a final answer yet today, but hopefully we'll be able to meet hopefully after September 29th, and hopefully there will be positive news. And again, after that date, we will know if the drug is approved or not in the United States. So the drug AMX0035 was tested in something called the CENTAR trial. So the CENTAR trial was a trial that I was the principal investigator of. It was conducted in partnership with the ALS community. It enrolled participants at 25 centers listed on the slide. And we basically had a randomized control study that was 24 weeks or 6 months, and an open label extension, which was many years. And we looked at functional endpoints as well as survival endpoints. I'm going to basically explain these in more general terms. What this means is that in the CENTAR trial, we evaluated both the impact of the drug on function, meaning can people eat, talk, walk, or do other activities, and that was evaluated over a 6-month course. But we also evaluated whether long-term the drug would result in improved survival. And the results were positive on both aspects. Specifically, AMX0035 was shown to slow down the decline in function by 25%. So the drug did not stop and did not reverse the disease, but it slowed it down by 25%, when measured over a 6-month period, and that's what the graph shows. It also resulted in improved survival. What this means is that people who took the drug, on average, lived about 5 months longer than people who were originally assigned to placebo in the trial. Right now, we're also doing, in addition to the central trial, we're also doing a study in partnership with AMX0035 that's also recruiting not only in the US, but also in Europe. This is a larger confirmatory trial. Why is that? Because every time you have some trial results, different agencies may ask you to confirm those results with a second study. So that's what's happening. So in Europe, the drug won't be available until the second study is finished. That's going to take a little bit more time. But in the US, again, we're hoping that the drug will be approved based on the results of the center trial without having to wait for the Phoenix trial, which is the new trial. Now, I want to switch gears now because I assume that some of you may have genetically based ALS, such as ALS caused by mutations in the SOD1 gene, or in the C9 or 72 gene, or in the FAST gene or other genes. And I'm not going to go into the details, but what I'm trying to say is that the other big change in ALS care that we're seeing now is that genetic testing and counseling are increasingly important because different companies are developing drugs like gene therapy tools or antisense oligonucleotide tools to stop the disease in people who carry those mutations. So that doesn't apply to everyone. It only applies to people who have familial or genetically based ALS. Specifically, there was some recent news out of Biogen that showed positive data in people carrying a mutation in the SOD1 gene that were treated with something called tofersen, which is a new drug that's basically an antisense oligonucleotide. What that means is that it basically turns off sort of the genetic expression of a gene that's mutated. And so if you had a mutation and you get tofersen, the disease is a little bit less progressive than if you don't take it. And so again, that only applies to people who have the genetic mutation, and more to come on this. The drug is not approved, I would say. I just want to make sure that people know that this is only available on a research basis for now. Now, on the positive side, I want to mention that there are many drugs in development for ALS. So I'm excited about AMX0035. I'm excited about, tofersen, perhaps we'll see what happens in the next steps for tofersen. But in addition to these promising drugs, there are many more that we need to learn more about, because it's possible that among these hundreds of drugs in the pipeline, it's possible that there may be more that can help us slow down the disease. And for this reason, we decided to do something that's a little bit different and a little bit new. We decided to change the trial design from a traditional trial design to a platform design. This is something that's available in the US right now, where we are trying to test multiple drugs at the same time. So if you think about a soccer game, the same stadium can fit many soccer games, right? You use the same stadium to play soccer, many different games. And that's what we're doing with the platform trial. Instead, if you use a traditional paradigm of drug development, you have to build a dedicated infrastructure or a dedicated structure or support system to study one drug at a time, and that's too slow. So with the platform trial now, we built like an optimized stadium, and we're playing many games in the sense that we're testing as many drugs as possible using the same resources. And so that's really important to accelerate the development of new drugs. This is known as the Healy ALS platform trial that's coordinated from the hospital where I am right now. This is sponsored by Dr. Mary Sukovich, who is the director of the Healy Center, in partnership with many organizations. And you can see here on the slide that there are many names and many logos because so many people have come together to support the trial. The trial actually started a few years ago when Dr. Sukovich, who you see on the slide on the left, met with Mr. Sean Healy, who was a very successful American businessman who was diagnosed with ALS. And so when he looked at the state of research, he saw a business opportunity in the sense, not to make money at all, but to say, he wanted to use his business skills to make the field better because he understood that the field was too slow. And so leveraging his business experience, he said, okay, why don't we do something different? Why don't we organize a better trial? And then he gave a donation to Dr. Sukovic, who came up with the idea of doing the Healy ALS platform trial, because basically by opening this big infrastructure where we can test multiple drugs, she realized that we can cut the time it takes to develop new drugs by half, we can cut the costs and also reduce placebo. So that's pretty much how the platform trial happened. At this time, we are testing 5 drugs. The 5 drugs are listed on the slide. They are all made by different pharmaceutical companies, and they all target different mechanisms. And we compare each drug to a shared placebo group. And because of that, we don't need to put too many people on placebo because we have a shared placebo group. Now we're testing 5 drugs, but I do want to mention that we continue to add more drugs to the platform so that we can test even more. This is a list of the things that we're measuring in the trial. There's many of them, and there's actually more in our documents. But essentially, I want to basically share the bottom line. The big message here is that we are with this trial, we are testing the impact of all these drugs on function, survival, respiratory function, muscle strength, and a number of biomarkers. We're also using the trial as an opportunity to learn more about ALS. And for this reason, we are collecting a number of biomarkers, and we're using smartphone apps to monitor the participants in their home environment. So this is a kind of a very new and innovative trial where we're trying to develop more drugs in a faster time frame and also learn about ALS so that new trials can be even better. We're enrolling participants at 74 sites in the US. Again, this is only available in the US right now. And if you have any questions about this trial, I want to suggest that you contact either our patient navigators who are listed there, or also you can see a couple of QR codes here. And so those will take, if you point your cell phone, the camera of your cell phone to those QR codes, they can take you to 2 different links that I would recommend for everyone. The weekly webinars are webinars that we give every Thursday, and they're also recorded and put on our website. So every Thursday we do a webinar like this where we give updates on research. And then the ALS link instead is a newsletter where you can sign up for the newsletter. Every couple of weeks we send out research developments. So I know it's in English. At some point I hope that we can translate it in Spanish as well. But essentially, if you have anyone who can, read English or listen to the webinars, again, we provide these updates on a weekly basis. So hopefully you can connect with us more frequently. And just to give a sense of this, we are basically, we're going to be releasing the results of the platform trial, first 4 drugs over the next few months. We are enrolling for drug number 5, and we are adding new drugs to the design. So to conclude, and this is my last slide, and then I want to take time for your questions. I think this is really an exciting time for ALS, because I think that we have a reasonable expectation to be able to make ALS a more treatable chronic condition in the near future. And I can say that because we have many drugs in the developmental pipeline, and so we are using new trial designs, and there's a lot of engagement from patients like you who continue to give us feedback and help us with the development of new drugs. And so I think that we're really going to require a cocktail approach to best tackle ALS, and then hopefully in the future we'll be able to even prevent it or reverse it, as I mentioned initially. So with that, I'll stop sharing and take your questions.
Mi nombre es María Laura, soy de Mendoza, y bueno, y mi hermana menor fue diagnosticada en septiembre de 2021 con ELA primaria. Comenzó con una pierna, ella es profesora de educación física, y comenzó con una pierna. Al día de hoy ya está necesitando un apoyo de un trípode o de un andador. Está con toda la medicación, Riluzol, Edarabone, y bueno, esta tiene 46 años. Entonces, bueno, por supuesto, expectante de todo lo nuevo que salga. Yo leí de esta nueva medicación, lo que salió en Canadá, pero yo la pregunta particular porque le quería hacer a la doctora es ¿cuánto tiempo de comenzado los primeros síntomas y hecho el diagnóstico es recomendable incorporar esta medicación para obtener los mejores resultados en cuanto a la funcionalidad y la sobrevida, que son los ensayos que han hecho en Canadá para ver y que han tenido resultados tan satisfactorios. Si influye ese tiempo, ¿no? Del diagnóstico y cuántos meses para adelante o años este medicamento podría revertir o mejorar las funciones en ellos.
Yeah, no, these are great questions. So there's multiple things that I would like to share with you today. So first of all, as I said earlier, I don't think that any of the drugs that are available right now are able to completely stop or reverse ALS. So I just want to be very clear, we're talking of drugs that can slow down the disease progression. And from the point of view, to kind of go back to your original question, I think that the sooner one starts medications, the better, because ideally, if you start as many medications as possible, as soon as possible, then you'll be able to slow down the disease more effectively. That said, one can always start them later. I'm just saying, kind of the ideal situation would be to start them sooner rather than later. I would say that, to clarify, that these medications are actually approved for ALS, not PLS. So PLS is a special form of ALS. And sometimes they're given off-label, but I just wanted to make sure that people understand that all of these medications, riluzole, edaravone, and even AMX0035, were actually tested in people with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or ALS, and never tested in patients with primary lateral sclerosis or PLS. That said, sometimes people take them because, again, there's either some diagnostic uncertainty or as an off-label agent.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Silvina, Sofía es mi hija, tengo 59 años, soy de Córdoba, hace 12 años que tengo de antigüedad de ELA. Y bueno, un poco mi pregunta era si tuviésemos acceso en algún momento a esta medicación, si se daría en cualquier estadio de la enfermedad. Otra pregunta sería, bueno, ¿qué eficacia tendría?
Yeah, I mean, basically, that's similar to the previous question. Personally, I think it's best to start medications in general, including AMX0035, as soon as possible. However, if that's not possible, because I mean, the drug was not even discovered, when you were first diagnosed, I think it's never too late to start. We don't have data in terms of what happens if you start these earlier versus later. Again, the studies have not explored that. So in general, and that doesn't apply only to AMX0035, I think it applies to all medications. It's better to start earlier, but if that's not possible, absolutely start them later.
A mí me diagnosticaron leucemia mieloide crónica en marzo del 2020. Estoy controlada con imatinib, una medicación, una quimio vía oral, y quisiera también saber si Albriosa sería compatible en este caso, ¿no? Cuando uno tiene otra patología.
That's a good question. To the best of my knowledge, I believe that they are. That said, it would be important for your physician to look into the interactions, because obviously, some drugs are never, some drugs are rare, like some for special cancers. And so one always needs to look for interactions and also monitor you carefully to make sure that such an interaction doesn't develop.
Yo hablo por Silvia, de Bahía Blanca. La pregunta es, no sé, creo que es más científica. Va relacionada con el tema de si funciona, en qué etapas de la enfermedad da eficacia. En el caso de ella, tiene afectados los miembros superiores, los inferiores, el tema de glutorio y el habla, específicamente. Básicamente si funciona ya en esa etapa de síntomas.
Yeah, I mean, the drug is supposed to affect generalized mechanisms, and so the effect is again more generalized. So it doesn't apply only to people with a certain type of the disease or a certain stage of the disease. And so absolutely, I don't see, I don't see why not.
Yo soy Marcelo Galmarini, tengo 67 años, con diagnóstico de hace casi 3 de enfermedad de motoneurona, con síntomas que empezaron 2 o 3 años antes. Mi pregunta es la siguiente. Sabemos de la heterogeneidad de los distintos variantes de la enfermedad de motoneurona. Mi pregunta es si los ensayos clínicos para desarrollar el AMX0035 incluyeron a pacientes de todos los tipos de ERA de motoneurona o simplemente exclusivamente a los de ALS puro. En mi caso, por ejemplo, tengo pieles, o sea, en la ERA primaria. Entonces quería saber si la eficacia de la droga es uniforme para todos los subtipos de ERA.
So as I said earlier, the drug was only tested in people with ALS. It was not tested in people with PLS, so I cannot comment on that because we never tested it.
Sí, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Soy Daniel, mi esposa, Rosana, tiene ELA del año 2014. Y bueno, recién en el 2016 se pudo identificar la enfermedad, tiene ELA vulvar y bueno, ya por supuesto ya tiene también sus miembros inferiores, también con problemas. Y mi pregunta es si el medicamento puede ser compatible con los medicamentos que se están tomando actualmente, como es el Riluzol, Dorfetán, si es compatible y se puede seguir tomando tanto este nuevo medicamento como los anteriores que se está tomando, ¿verdad?
Yes, absolutely.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Mi nombre es Marilyn, yo soy de Paraguay. Tengo actualmente a mi mamá lejos, está en Argentina. Bueno, la pregunta es para la doctora, ¿cómo va a ser la administración de este nuevo medicamento? Si va a haber intervalos, si son varias tomas, como se van con los otros remedios.
Yes, so so first of all, I just want to point out again that the drug has not been approved in the United States. The only country where AMX0035 was approved is Canada. So while we hope that it will soon be approved in the United States, hopefully in September of this year, to clarify, the drug is not available as of right now in the United States. It's only available in Canada. In terms of the dosage, once it's approved, that will be in the insert package. Whenever you buy a medication, a box, that there's all the instructions inside. All the details have been published. So maybe after this call, if you don't mind, you could circulate the publication and you can bring the publication to your physicians and they can help you look into that. I mean, briefly, basically, the drug is taken twice a day. You take it once a day for 2 or 3 weeks, and then you take it twice a day. And you need to watch for side effects, which are rare, but they're possible. And so I would be happy to circulate the publication. I know it's a little bit technical, but I think you can bring it to your physician and they should be able to follow that. And it tells you everything about the dosage, the side effects, the schedule, and all of that. Because again, it is, as of right now, it's an experimental product. Once it's approved, it will, hopefully, once approved, it will be available as a prescription drug, but it still needs to be taken under the direction and supervision of a physician.
Decía, soy de Córdoba, tengo a mi cuñado que le diagnosticaron él hace más de un año, un poquito más de un año. Fuimos a las clínicas Holy Cross, a Estados Unidos. Ahí no me acuerdo el apellido de Darío, pero él, gracias a lo de la página, pudimos conectarnos e ir allá. y a él le recetaron unas pastillas que teóricamente son algo referido a la AMX, con dos componentes más o menos parecidos. Esta es la pregunta puntual para la doctora. Los componentes son sodium PB y TUPCA. No sé si son los mismos, si es la misma, si es una genérica que compramos allá y la traemos, si es la misma que va a salir acá. Esa es la pregunta puntual para la doctora.
So as you know, as I said earlier, I can circulate the paper where it shows sort of the ingredients. And so I think that that's what this person is referring to, that sometimes people try to obtain the individual compounds that make up AMX0035. And just kind of to take a step back, I didn't really mention it before, but the drug AMX0035 is a combination of two different ingredients. So some people have been purchasing the two ingredients individually. I don't know, I cannot comment on whether they are the same because the sources are different. And so the only thing that we tested was the actual AMX0035, which is a combination of the two. So I cannot comment on kind of the products that are purchased online or through other sources because they're not what was tested in the trial. I think this is a complicated topic on multiple levels, so I'll try to explain it. And then obviously I also highly respect the desire of patients to get access. And I highly respect the fact that many people will say, even if we don't have 100% certainty that it's the same product, I just gonna take my chances. I completely understand that and I completely respect that. But just, on the scientific side, I just want to mention that what was tested is AMX0035, which is a pharmaceutical grade compound, which is a combination of two products. Now, the two products are called sodium phenylbutyrate and TADCA. Now, sodium phenylbutyrate, technically speaking, exists as an individual pharmaceutical grade product in the US. I don't know about Argentina, I'm sorry about that, but basically I know that at least in the US and in other countries, I don't know all the countries, but at least in some countries, it exists as a pharmaceutical grade product that can be prescribed. Now, it exists because it's indicated for a very rare pediatric disease, a disease of metabolism that has nothing to do with ALS. So it was developed for a different indication for kids with a special disease, and that's why it exists on the market. Now, the supplies of that product are limited because, again, it was just originally made before it was tested in the central trial. It was just made for those kids, and it's very expensive, and it's not always reimbursed by insurance because, technically speaking, it's not approved for ALS. So that creates a whole scenario where some people are able to purchase it and pay for it. Other people's insurance will sort of close an eye and approve it. So that's the situation. That product, technically speaking, exists, but again, it's for a different indication. TADCA, which is the other component, is actually not available pharmaceutical grade in the US. It's only available pharmaceutical grade in Italy. However, in the US, you can buy online on Amazon or other services, you can buy the supplement version of TADCA. Is it the same thing as the pharmaceutical grade TADCA? I do not know. Because as you know, the supplement industry or nutritional supplements, it's not FDA regulated. So what's in the box that you buy on Amazon could be the real thing or not. I don't know about it. I have no idea and I have no control over it, right? So we have this discussion with our patients all the time. I do with mine as well. It's not a recommendation to say, yes, you have to do this or you have to do that. I explain what I just explained to you, and then everyone can make their choices based on their individual situation. And I think that that's what most of my colleagues do, that they explain the situation. Do you prefer to wait for the actual product? Do you want to, again, try to get what you can get right now? And again, knowing that there are caveats and there are limitations because right now, those are the products on the market. So it's not just a matter, do they exist, but can you have access to them? And what can you have access to? I hope that that's clear. It's a little bit of a challenging situation. And believe me, as I said at the beginning, I completely understand that this is not a great situation to be in, because from a patient perspective, I completely understand the desire to, to have access. And so I think that the best way for that to be accomplished is for the drug to be approved in as many countries as possible so that everyone can have access to it. Right now, it's this sort of puzzle situation where some people get it through different sources and it's not clear what they're actually getting. So I'm not very happy about this situation. I mean, I think it's always better for drugs to be approved and monitored and controlled and under supervision.
Bueno, mi nombre es Pablo Gatti, vivo en Estados Unidos hace 3 años. Llegué acá justo con el diagnóstico y bueno, estoy peleando acá la ELA como todo el mundo. Y yo le quería hacer unas preguntas a la doctora Paganoni que me surgen de haber leído los resultados del Trial Centaur, que es con respecto a los neurofilamentos. El Trial tuvo muy buenos números, o bastante buenos, excepto en los neurofilamentos, que es un biomarcador que en el grupo que recibió la droga fueron inclusive más altos que en el grupo placebo. Y bueno, yo me puse a investigar un poco y vi que hay varios tipos de neurofilamentos. Por ejemplo, los que miden en el Trial Centaur son distintos a los que midieron en el Trial de Toffersen. Después vi que hay otro ensayo, por ejemplo, que se hizo con Riluzol, tienen otras letras diferentes. Yo quería que la doctora Paganoni me aclare un poquito cuántos tipos de neurofilamentos hay, si hay algún sistema estandarizado ya para poder comparar en todos los trials, o hay varios tipos, y qué piensa con respecto al resultado que hubo en el trial donde ella participó, donde lamentablemente todos los valores dieron bien, digamos, a favor de los pacientes de ELA, menos los neurofilamentos que aumentaron en el grupo que recibió la droga comparado con el grupo placebo.
Yeah, there's a number of questions here, and I think they're all very good. So the two main types, they're not the only ones, but the two main types of neurofilaments are the ones that are measured routinely in trials or in other settings are the neurofilament heavy chain and the neurofilament light. So there's the two main ones are the heavy and the light. Now, they were measured in the trial, and as you said, they didn't move. They were not changed by the treatment. However, I want to point out that different trials use different assays and different measurement techniques, and we only measured the neurofilament levels in the central trial in plasma, not in the spinal fluid. So the spinal fluid was not taken in the trial, so we couldn't measure it. And so what I'm trying to get at is that we're still trying to learn what the meaning of neurofilament levels is. While obviously it's great when you see a reduction, at the same time, we don't really know exactly what kind of, whether that's necessary or what the predictive value of that is, or what really the meaning of that is on clinical outcomes. So it's not just, it's not that you can just make the conclusion, well, it didn't impact neurofilaments and therefore there's a problem. That's not true. I mean, what's most important for patients, in fact, is the effect on clinical function and survival, not the effect on a biomarker that we're still learning about. The biomarker is still in development. It's not an established biomarker yet. It will be soon, I think. And again, we have to learn more about the type, the assay, the way to measure it, the way to do the statistics on it. The field is still learning a lot about it.
Quisiera saber en qué se diferencia el modo, el accionar de la AMX0035 con el Riluzol o el edarabone. ¿Cómo accionan con las neuronas? Debe haber algo distinto porque la hace mejor.
Right. No, that's very important. And actually, one of the reasons I was emphasizing the importance of a cocktail approach, meaning combine different treatments in the same person, is that all of these drugs have very different mechanisms of action. So it's not like they're competing for, with one another. They're actually adding to one another because they act on different parts of the cell, and each of them has the goal of improving the health of the neurons. That's the goal. But they do so by doing very different things. So specifically, Riluzole was developed first, and it reduces the sort of the excitement or the something called the glutamate excitability of the neurons. That if it's too much, it can lead actually to neuronal damage. And so that's one mechanism of action for one drug. Now, edaravone works as an antioxidant. And then lastly, AMX0035, as I said earlier, it's a combination of two different compounds, and each of them works on two different parts of the cell. The sodium phenylbutyrate part reduces ER stress, which is essentially a part of the cell that deals with aggregation of toxic products. So if you have too much of that ER stress, you cannot get rid of these toxic buildups. And the other part, the TADCA, also known as TERSO, works on mitochondrial health, and mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. And it works to inhibit mitochondrial-mediated apoptosis, which is a way by which the neurons die. So again, they all do different things. The technical aspects of these are less important. What's important is that they add value to each other.
¿Quién más tiene una pregunta sobre la AMX0035? Si no, pasamos al otro tema de la noche, que es el de la plataforma Healy. Marcelo, creo que tenés otra pregunta específicamente sobre la plataforma Healy.
Sí, y quería saber en qué fase están, si están todas en la misma o una más avanzada que otra de estas 5 drogas.
So there's the initial group of drugs started together. So to be precise, A, B, and C, the first 3 drugs, started at exactly the same time. The second drug was added 6 months later. I'm sorry, the 4th drug, regimen D, was added 6 months later. And then the 5th drug, regimen E, was added after a few months. So essentially, they're all at the same stage of development, but they started in the trial at different times. And for this reason, we're going to have the results in a staggered way, depending on when they started. So everyone goes through the same process, but obviously the ones that started earlier will have results sooner. So specifically for A, B, and C, the first 3 drugs, we expect results late this summer and in the fall. For drug number 4, also regimen D, we expect the drugs sort of late summer, early fall, the results late summer, early fall. The 5th drug is still recruiting, so it started later, so it still has to recruit participants, and then we're going to have the results next year in 2023.
Y la otra pregunta es si alguna de ellas tiene que ver con células madres.
So the 5 drugs that are being tested right now in the platform trial are different molecules that are not stem cell based. We are working to add 2 more drugs to the platform later this year. They're also not stem cell based. It's possible that there may be stem cells based treatments in the trial, but again, not in the very first group. It just depends on which companies submit applications to enter the platform trial. So it's not mandatory, obviously, to participate in the platform trial. It's a submission process. And then there is a therapy evaluation committee that decides which drugs can enter the platform from the pool of applicants, and the decision is based on sort of the scientific rationale and the data that each drug has to support its use in ALS.
¿Hay alguno de estos ensayos que todavía está abierto y se reciben candidatos internacionales? O sea, algunos que estén abiertos en Argentina, por ejemplo. Puede ser, quizás no de Healy, pero otros.
Great question. Yes, absolutely. At this time, we are recruiting for drug number 5. And as I said earlier, because we're adding 2 more drugs, sort of end of the year, early next year, the latest, there will be more spots. So the idea of the trial is to be a continuous trial where as we test, the first group of drugs, then, we complete that testing and then we move on to the next set of drugs. So the idea is to always have spots available for participants. International participants can participate in the trial. In fact, we do have a number of international participants. Some of our sites have enrolled people from Central and South America, and our northern sites have enrolled people from Canada. Anyone is welcome to come. The only requirement is that people need to be able to visit the site, because there are some required in-person visits. Now, we can leverage telemedicine to some extent, but I do want to emphasize that people still need to be present in person at the site to participate in the trial. And so whether that's feasible from a visa perspective, a travel perspective, etc., that obviously depends on the individual. So people will have to travel to the United States multiple times to be enrolled.
Okay, excellent. That was all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was very clear. It was very comprehensive. So I think it's going to be really, really useful for our community. And we will keep, we will keep attending the Healy platform updates every so often. We have done that already. And of course, it's very useful, very interesting. And again, we are crossing our fingers. We are keeping our fingers really crossed to see if AMX is also approved in the US. We have been in talks also with Michelle and the team in Amylyx. They are doing a great job. They are working a lot. I can tell. And it was excellent news to know that it was at least approved in Canada. So I think that's a great first step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you both for all of this.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. And we will stay in touch, and we will see you next time. Hopefully by the end of this year, maybe in San Diego. I don't know.
Let's do that.
We'll see.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Paganoni. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Les agradecemos entonces. Muchísimas gracias por haber participado el día de hoy de esta aula virtual, y nos estamos encontrando la próxima, ¿sí? Muchas gracias a todos.
Gracias. Chau, chau.